Good afternoon. My warm respects to the principal of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Academy, Miss Gloria Chang, to your STEM coordinator, Mr. Guerrero Lucas, and of course to your subject teacher, my good friend, Mr. Jim Ryan P. Solomon. It is my pleasure to be with you and to deliver this topic to the senior high school STEM students of IMA. Now, first of all, I would like to apologize for not being able to deliver this message to you live, as I have equally important matters to attend to. But rest assured that I have coordinated well with Sir Jim Ryan Solomon as to how we can mentor the students of IMA in the conduct of your senior high school research, which means to say that this will not be a one-time engagement with me and with the Davao Oriental State University. So you can expect me to journey with you in your quest for additional knowledge, and as you also comply with the requirements set before your graduation, particularly on the conduct of senior high school research. The title of my talk is Research is the New Sexy, Inputs on Writing a Scientific Paper. There were many comments that they find research to be difficult. But I think that with your batch and with my students, we can start a new research culture, calling research as the new sexy, so that more and more students will be highly engaged in it, and more students will also be interested in it. So I'll be giving you inputs on writing a scientific paper, and let's try to make it as simple as possible in a way that you will also enjoy the writing process. By the way, my name is Junel P. Villegas. I'm currently a faculty of the Institute of Education and Teacher Training in the Davao Oriental State University. And at the same time, I am the Board of Regents Secretary and a gender and development focal person. Currently, I'm also the managing editor of the Davao Research Journal. Later on, I will be sharing with you why this Davao Research Journal is important in this talk. So in a nutshell, these are our topics this afternoon. Number one, we will be defining what is research. Number two, the research process in a nutshell. Number three, finding the right topic for a high school research and drowning in a sea of literatures, selecting a research approach, referencing in a smart way, and we will be dealing with common myths about research and how to get the research right. All in all, as I was tasked by Sir Jim, this is to give you an overview what to do for the rest of the school year, especially in complying with your research requirement in high school. Now, I want you to think of it not as a pure requirement, as a requirement that you have to comply just to pass. But I want you to enjoy the process as well. Because doing research is actually an enjoyable thing. It's actually an enjoyable process. And you just have to have the correct mindset in dealing with it. Of course, you have to deal with a lot of sleepless nights and meal-less breaks, but this is part of the colorful journey of doing research. And if you're able to manage your time well, I'm sure you'll be able to produce a really good output, especially with the resources of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Academy. Let's start off by defining what is research. Research, in its sense, has broad definition. It has different meanings to different institutions and human agencies. But for academic institutions like us, this refers to a systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Meaning to say, this should be systematic. So in doing research, you need to follow a process, a scientific procedure for you to be able to establish new facts and reach new conclusions, which means to say, this talks about the purpose of doing research. Why do we do research? Number one, that is to discover new knowledge, to explain a phenomenon, and of course, create generalizations that will be useful for our decisions, for policy decisions, for educational decisions, and a lot more. And doing that, you have to undergo a scientific process. So for the next few slides, I will be talking what is this scientific process all about. Now, I'm sure you have your own definition of research as well. And if you try to browse Google, for example, and try to read books, you will be dealing with a lot of definitions. But I'd like to emphasize that for academic institutions like us, this should be an investigation, and not just any investigation, but it should be a systematic investigation. Now, this is a framework for research that I would like to show to you the interconnectedness of worldviews, design, and research methods. We should start off with philosophical worldviews. No? We have the post-positivist, constructivist, transformative, and pragmatic. Kasi usually, when we do research, we go immediately to writing. But we often forget why is there a need to write, and we often forget from what philosophical standpoint are we writing. Is it coming from a post-positivist, constructivist, transformative, or pragmatic? Because this will determine the journey in the research writing process. This will also tell us what specific knowledge are we trying to build or to establish, and in what way, and how are we establishing this one. Of course, doing that, we make use of different designs in research. So the designs could be quantitative, or it could be qualitative, or a mix of quanti and quali, mixed methods. And then you also have your methods. You have your questions, you have the data collection, you have the data analysis, interpretation, and validation. And all of these things are interconnected. Meaning to say, your philosophical worldview will influence the design of research that you will be doing. And at the same time, the design of research that you will be doing, let's say you want to have quantitative research, will also inform the methods, the specific methods that you will be employing or implementing in your research project. And these research methods, in turn, will influence your philosophical worldviews, or will affirm your worldviews. So let me try to discuss what are these worldviews. In a highly pluralistic world, I have different ideas, and you also have different ideas. So let's say there are 40 of you in the class. That means there are also 40 different ways on how we view the world. And that knowledge alone can influence how we do research, how we conduct research. That's why philosophers, they have tried to categorize these different worldviews in such a way that we will be understanding from what standpoint is this researcher coming from. Let's say you are conducting research from a post-positivist worldview. So post-positivism, there is determination, reductionism, empirical observation and measurement, and theory verification. Empirical observation means, no, in a post-positivist perspective or worldview, is that we are viewing the world as it is through empirical observations. Meaning to say, the inspiration of a post-positivist worldview is we cannot we cannot define absolute truth. We can only approximate it. So for experimental researches, for example, let's say you are testing the, let's say you are testing the microplastic content of a certain bivalve. No. And then, of course, you have to undergo different methods in order to weigh the microplastics in a bivalve species. That is, and then you weigh, then you record the weight in grams, for example. These are empirical observations, meaning to say the observations that you can derive as of the moment. And in turn, you can use these observations to verify theories. For example, microplastics, the microplastic content in the bivalve is very high. Therefore, this verifies the theory that bivalves are in fact repository of microplastics. Meaning to say, when we say post-positivism, the post-positivism worldview defines the truth, defines that we can only approximate the truth, meaning we can only estimate the truth, but we cannot uncover an absolute truth. Because in the first place, there could be different truths or different versions of truth from among other perspectives or from among other worldviews. And then this is very common among social scientists, among social researchers. They make use of the constructivism worldview. Constructivism worldview talks about understanding, meaning to say, the very purpose is to understand the phenomenon. Now, post-positivism, it's to determine what causes the phenomenon. Therefore, you make empirical observations. But in constructivism, you would like to understand the phenomenon. And in understanding the phenomenon, you make use of multiple participant meanings. So this is what I mean by saying that for example, let's say a ball pen. A ball pen could have different meanings among other participants. Let's say for a student like you view a ball pen as a learning tool. But for a construction worker, or for a teacher, or for a doctor, a ball pen may have different meanings. So it's just the same with constructivism. We have COVID-19, for example, and COVID-19, there are people who view this as negative. There are people who view this as positive. And in a constructivism worldview, it is your idea to understand why this is the case. And later on, create social and historical constructs leading to theory generation. Meaning to say, if in post-positivism, you just verify the theory through your empirical observations, empirical measurements, in constructivism, you are going to build your own theory. So this is a very good thing about doing research is you have to understand first, what is your worldview? Am I going to verify a certain theory? Or am I going to build a new theory or affirm a new theory? And then there is this transformative worldview. The transformative worldview is highly political. It's power and justice oriented, and it is change oriented. Now, I'm saying this a lot with many high school students. Most of you are actually change oriented. No? Meaning to say, you see that this is the problem in microplastics, or you see that this is a problem in pollution, and you want change because you're seeing this problem as a problem. So you want to collaborate with others, you want power and you want justice because you need to impose changes. So this is from a transformative worldview. No? And meaning to say, if you are coming from this worldview, this is your worldview, this will also inform your research methodologies later on. Because if you want change, well, change is something more than measurements and empirical observations. Definitely, you cannot undergo change or you cannot impose change if you just measure how many trees are there in the forest or how many elephants are there in the jungle. No, you can't do that. However, there could be an addition to your methods so you can transform your research view into a transformative worldview. Okay, because this is change oriented. And there are also people who are pragmatic. They make use of the pragmatism worldview. Now, pragmatism talks about consequences of action. You're being practical. You're being problem-centered. And you're being real-world practice-oriented. Meaning to say, let's say, if you are a pragmatic person, you recognize the problem. Let's say you recognize the problem on pollution. You recognize the problem on biodiversity loss. You recognize the problem on deforestation. And therefore, you know for a fact that all of these things are consequences or could be consequences of human disturbance or anthropogenic threats. So what you do now as a pragmatic researcher is, as much as possible, you try to conduct a research using real-world practice and of course focusing on the problem and recognizing also that we have a pluralistic point of views. In a short manner, in a short explanation, we would say that these worldviews highly influence the way we do research. And therefore, it is essential for any researcher to be aware and to understand what particular worldview are you using in order to go about your research or to complete your study. Now, there are a lot of other worldviews you can explore more. You can read more about this, but I'll be only sharing the 4 of these in this particular talk for your appreciation. Now, let me illustrate further what I mean by saying that your worldview determines how we do research. Take a look at this. This is a very old illustration. As a matter of fact, this has been used in many contexts. That there are, let's say in this illustration, there are 4 blind men and 1 elephant. And then the blind men are asked to describe the elephant. And depending on the worldview that they're using, depending on the perspectives or depending on the limitations of their research methods, for example, they're also seeing the elephant as different things. For example, the red one here says that an elephant is like a big snake. And the white one, no, it's like a tree stump. The green one, what are you saying? It's like a sheath of leather. And then the yellow one, you're all wrong. It's actually like a little furry mouse. But the point of the illustration is, who among them is true? Or who among them is telling the truth? All of them are telling the truth. That's why I said in the post-positivist perspective or in the post-positivist worldview, we cannot define an absolute truth. We can only approximate or we can only estimate the truth. So for the red one, saying that the elephant is like a big snake, it's his own approximation or estimation of the truth. And we cannot discredit that because in his particular worldview, or in his particular assessment, the elephant is like a big snake. But this may not be different, or this may not be the same with the yellow one who says that the elephant is like a furry mouse. So all of these four men, they're approximating the truth. That's post-positivism. Now, looking at the big picture, if you combine that it's like a tree stump, the big snake, it's like a sheath of leather, it's a little furry mouse, then we can say the bigger picture that the elephant is actually big. And for the four blind men, they're limited to their senses. Therefore, they cannot really tell what an elephant looks like or what an elephant feels like. And most of the time, as researchers, we are like the four blind men. No? Meaning to say, let's say we do research in Pujada Bay or in Mayo Bay, and then these are our observations. Now, we cannot say that this is everything. Now, this is everything that we know. This is the absolute truth, and therefore you must follow it. No. Because as researchers, we are also limited to our senses, to our methodologies, to our resources. That's why when we do research, it's like doing one after the other. For example, when you conduct, as I conduct my thesis, I found out that this is the case about the Philippine brown deer because my thesis talks about the Philippine deer. And then later on, I could proceed, I could continue my research work still on the Philippine brown deer, but investigating other phenomena because it's a cumulative body of knowledge. We cannot know everything in just one glance. The same with, we cannot solve everything in one research. And this is the danger, or hindi naman siguro danger, but this is the difficult case na if you are not able to realize that researches are also limited. The science is also limited in a general sense. And there are a lot of ideal students who think that their research can really do something to change the world. Yeah, it may be true that it can contribute something to change the world. But the point there is you cannot solve everything in just one research. You don't have to stress yourself so much about it. Meaning to say, we just do research a little step at a time. And later on, as we progress, because there is so much in the world that needs to be done, as we progress, then we also realize that we are doing something for the betterment of the world that we are living in. Anyways, so which means to say that as of this moment, I hope you assess for yourself what are your worldviews, and in doing your research, before you think of the research process, you think first what particular worldview are you using? Because later it will also influence the kind of theories that you will be, the type of theories that you will be employing or integrating in your analytical frameworks. Now, this is the research process in a nutshell. And most of the students, they come to me or they ask me about, sir, what could be a good research? This is actually based on experience. A lot of students would come to me and ask me about a research title because they want to submit it to their teachers. But I would say, no, I'm sorry, but that practice is actually not good or not ideal. Hindi naman not good, not ideal. Because a lot of teachers, they're doing that practice na at the start of the class, you are asked to submit your titles without undergoing or without necessarily undergoing these research processes or preliminary research processes. Well, if you ask for a title, then the students can give titles. But these titles may not be informed. And these titles may not be something that really runs into their mind. No, they just copied and pasted that from different sources, maybe it's books or through online. And at the end of the day, we are defeating the purpose of the research process because we're asking titles right away. No? And the point also there is we do not have to concern ourselves with titles, because the title can be changed at any process or at any stage in the research process. The topic or the title that you are doing now or that you have written now may be changed later as you progress, let's say in the methodological part, or as you conduct your study, or when you finish writing the manuscript, you can change it. Anyways, it's not final. So personally, I would say that instead of asking for titles, we go ask for topics from our students. That's why the first phase in the research process, as I have mentioned here, is brainstorming for research topics. Meaning to say, as a class, we could meet and as a class, we could meet and really just brainstorm about research topics. No? Research topics are broad, no? Somewhat broad. For example, you would like to study about pollution, or you would like to study about biodiversity loss. You would like to study about species conservation, or you would like to study about uh, microplastics. You would like to study about ocean acidification, or you would like to study about pollution management or waste management. So these are broad topics, meaning to say, do not concern yourselves yet about what title are you going to submit, but what topic are you going to study? Because later on, you will be identifying the problem and asking questions. For example, you found out na you're interested to study about biodiversity loss. And later, you ask, what is the problem about biodiversity loss? And ask questions. So in biodiversity loss, for example, you see that there's a problem in, let's say, a particular species. So what happened to the Philippine eagle? Why are the Philippine eagles population declining over the years? So these are the kind of research questions that you can write down. No? So first, you start with the research topic and then write down as many problems and questions that you can think of. So in this case, you can prepare, let's say, a matrix. One matrix, one column there for your research topic that you're really interested in. I'm sure as students, you are very passionate about certain things, and that's a good thing because you can actually focus your energies on it and in doing research. And next column talks about the different problems or questions. You just write them down, all of them. What's wrong with the Philippine eagle? What do the Philippine eagles eat? And if they eat, what kind of food? And what size, particular size of food, etc. You write down, use your curious and creative minds in writing down all those problems. And then later on, we can read related studies. So when we read related studies, we are further refining, hinay-hinay nato ma-cross out ang kaning mga problems sa kadaghang problems nga atong gilista. Hinay-hinay nato ma-cross out nga, uy, nakita na pala nako, na ako'y nabasa nga, there is already this literature describing the diet behavior of the Philippine eagle. So it's not a problem anymore because it's already a known science. So you move to the next problem. Until such time that you're able to exhaust your reading on related literatures. And you can refine now what problems or questions will you be focusing on, because you can now see the gap in the literature, meaning the gap in science. And most of the time, we find na di rin nato makita, di rin nato ma-appreciate na not everything pala in the world can be Googled. So as I was saying, at this moment, you can now say that not everything pala can be Googled, or not everything is already known by science. So there is a lot of gaps in the literatures. You find one gap only, because this is a senior high school research. And then you do that in your high school research, or you choose that as a research topic. Okay? So, and the next is you also understand the ways to collect the data. This is about the methodologies. Now, what we usually think of, I started groping in the dark as well. No? Hindi naman ako nag-start na I'm already good in research writing. I actually started just like you. Now, one of the things that really bothers me, or one of the things that really frightens me, is the methods of data collection. Kasi dito napapasok yung idea na I don't know this, hindi ko alam to. So paano to gawin, no? And usually we are very stressed with this also. Up to an extent na we are thinking na alam na ito ng iba, bakit hindi ko alam? But in the first place, your methodologies is unique to your research. And it's up to you, no, based on the studies that you are able to read, for example, based on the literatures that you're able to read, it's up to you which particular methodology you would like to adopt. Also, considering the resources that you have. So if you don't have these facilities, for example, or if you don't have these equipment, why do you have to engage into that kind of research? So you find a more practical research topic. And then, of course, when you understand the ways to collect data, you also find the answers to the research questions. This is all about the data implementation or the data gathering phase, depending on the methods that you're using. Then after that, you already have the results, the answers to your research questions. You can now report your findings, draw conclusions, make recommendations, and of course, share your research later on. So I'll go through these stages one by one so you can further appreciate. Now, so how do I find, as a senior high school student, how do I find the right topic? You ask your question first. What data do I need to answer the research question? For example, I'm studying about, let's say, biodiversity loss again. And then I'd like to find out what are the threats to the population of, let's say, the Philippine wartipig. So what do I need to answer these questions? Meron ba akong access sa data? If I do interviews, can I enter, or can I enter the particular locality where I would like to conduct the interviews? Or do I have access to these people? And you also ask, has any research been conducting by others in this subject or area already? Because if there is, then you better read that research and later on modify so your research will be different from the research that was already conducted. That was previously conducted. So my advice is it must be a topic that you are interested in. Remember, do not concern yourselves yet with titles. You should be concerned about topics. So what topic? As of this moment, try to ask yourself, what topic would you like to study? Do I like to study about marine organisms, terrestrial organisms, etc.? Depending on the topic, biodiversity loss, pollution, provided that it should be a topic that you're interested in. So it will not be a laborious process for you. I have a student, for example, before, he is really interested in doing biodiversity researches. As a matter of fact, there are instances that he keeps on asking me about certain species. What can you say about this, sir, etc., etc. And then later on in college, he tried to pursue medical technology. So when I asked him, are you sure that you are going to pursue medical technology? Because it's a different field. No? Your interest is on wildlife biology. In medical technology, you will be dealing with a lot of equipment, getting blood, studying about the parasites, etc., etc. And yun nga, nag-enroll siya talaga ng medical technology, but later on, he shifted to wildlife ecology. So that's how interest can define our career path. That's how, and depending on how we view it, or depending on how we define our career interests. In research, that's also the case. You should work on something that you're really interested in. Otherwise, you will be wasting resources. You will be wasting your time, your effort, and then your resources. So, there are also topics that are strand related, depending on your bias, depending on your strand. UMS, they have different research topics. ABM, they have different research topics. The GAS, they also have different research topics. And so with STEM. Now, in STEM, you will be dealing with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So these are 4 key areas in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics that you would like to venture on. So this is posible kasi na we have very limited differences. So these fields are interconnected and these fields are quite similar to one another. But if you try to really dig deeper and define them further, it's a different thing. There are different research topics in science. There are different research topics in technology, in engineering, and mathematics. So as STEM students, you should be able to identify in which particular core area you are very much inclined into. For example, you're inclined to science. So you do research as related to science. But if you're inclined to technology, you do research related to technology. No? You invent something, you prepare prototype models, you evaluate the efficiency of a certain machine or a certain device. That's technology. Or if you do research in engineering, that's also an interesting part. You also have to define which area in engineering. Is it civil engineering, geodetic, or environmental engineering, etc.? Or you could be interested in mathematics. So you can conduct mathematics investigation projects or MITs. Well, all of these things, this may be something that may interest you. Or as of this moment, it may be true that you are not able to define your interests yet. So in the next few slides, I'll be trying to show you certain tips on how to further streamline research topics. You can also check the Sustainable Development Goals. Kasi usually, we have a lot of advocacies in life. May mga pinaglalaban tayo sa post natin sa Twitter, sa post natin sa Facebook. And if you try to check the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, your research topic may be anchored to these SDGs. For example, climate action. So if you want to study about climate change and vulnerability assessments, for example, or you can study about life below water, marine organisms, pollution in marine environment, microplastics, macroplastics, life on land, for example, biodiversity loss, deforestation, species management, species conservation, or you could also talk about clean water and sanitation. Let's say you would like to test the water potability of faucets in the Immaculate Heart of Mary Academy. That's possible. You could do that. You could explore that as a research topic. Or you would like to have sustainable cities and communities, for example. Affordable and clean energy. Let's say you would like to develop a machine that generates electricity using water or using the solar energy, something like that. So you have to look at, why am I telling you this? You have to look at the agenda in the Sustainable Development Goals, because this is also what is being looked at by many researchers across the globe, or many scholars across the globe. So most of their studies, the study of experts, they're also anchored on the SDGs. So if you try to determine a topic that's related to the SDGs, you expect that you can find a lot of literatures as well. Or you can check in the Philippines, for example, this is the National Integrated Basic Research Agenda from 2017 to 2022. So there are three key result areas: malasakit, kaunlaran, at pagbabago. So under the malasakit, you have water security, food and nutrition security, health sufficiency; kaunlaran, clean energy, sustainable communities; pagbabago, inclusive nation building. So you can relate your research topics here as well. Let's say watershed studies, water quality, accessibility and availability, that's in water security, malasakit. Or biodiversity studies, malasakit pa rin yan. Let's say alternative energy, kaunlaran. Or basic veterinary studies, malasakit. Let's say you would like to study about AFS or ASF, African swine flu. Or you would like to study about in the environmental and anthropogenic activities in Dahican Bay or Mayo Bay. That's related to kaunlaran. Meaning to say, you can frame your research topics, your research interests, using this agenda. And a lot of scholars in the Philippines, we are actually looking at this research agenda as well in framing our research. And the good thing about aligning your research interests in the agenda is, if you would like to submit your research for funding, the DOST, for example, they provide generous funds to support your study or to support your research. Or you can also consider the Basic Education Research Agenda, or the BERA. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they have teaching and learning, child education, child protection, human resource development, and governance under DepEd as research agenda. Or in the Immaculate Heart of Mary Academy, you can also opt to set your own research agenda. Kasi in the previous years that I sat down as a panel member, as a panel of evaluator in the STEM defenses, okay, I have seen that there are a lot of students who are interested or who are into marine pollution, marine plastic pollution. Siguro in my estimate, it's around 80% of the students have particular researches like related to marine pollution. Kasi we can distribute also our students, no? Not only in marine, but they can also be students who will study terrestrial, or there could be students who would like to study about technology, or there could be students who will engage into mathematics investigatory projects, etc. So as a class, we can set a research agenda and then try to identify the interests and the inclinations of the students para it would be more of a participatory approach on our part. No, para din hindi lahat marine. Kasi baka yung mga students natin, they're interested in other things. But because they're seeing that their classmates are doing marine works, marine related studies, and then they just join the bandwagon. No, so our purpose as teachers is to show them that there are a lot of possibilities in doing research, and therefore they can explore many topics in research. So I'm sure that at this point, you now have an idea what particular topic are you interested. So later, we will refine that topic. So paano ba or ano ba ang gusto kong, what do I like to study about this topic? Now, I'll be giving you some tips in writing a research title. The following parameters can be used to help you formulate a suitable research paper title, but this is not actually prescriptive. No, this is more of tips only. Meaning to say, you may or you may not follow certain items. What's important here is that if you're able to choose a topic now, you start writing a research title, but it should be a working title only. Working title muna. And then you keep in mind that you can change that title in any stage of the writing process. So, ano ba ang working title? Ang working title is like, or a running title. A working title is like a shortened version of your actual research title. And the purpose of having a working title is just to focus your attention to these topics. For example, gusto ko munang, I would like to study about the conservation of the marine turtle in Dahican. So yun lang muna, working title. No specifics yet. Kasi when you read the literature, when you read studies related to marine turtles, later on you will be able to refine your methods, to refine your strategies, to refine your research problems, and you can immediately go back to your research title and revise the title. Okay? So these are the parameters that you may use. First, the purpose of the research, let's say the conservation of. So that's the purpose. And or you can include the narrative tone of the paper, typically defined by the type of the research. For example, an experimental research, or let's say a quantitative research or descriptive research on, ganon. Or you could also use the methods used. For example, ecological profiling of marine turtles in the Dahican Bay. So the method there is ecological profiling. Okay? Here are more tips. No? One, you should indicate accurately the subject and scope of the study. Meaning to say, you should be able to define what subject. Let's say marine turtle, so it should be clearly stated in your research title already. And what about the marine turtle? So that's the scope. And you should also avoid using abbreviations. Let's say, for example, climate change, knowledge, attitude, and skills of EMA students on climate change. So if I am an outsider, I do not know anything about EMA, so I will be confused. What is EMA? So you should be spelling out Immaculate Heart of Mary Academy. The third tip would be use words that create a positive impression and stimulate readers' interests. Meaning to say, kasi the purpose of your research title is it should be able to capture readers' interest. So if your research title is not very interesting, then nobody would care to read your research. Therefore, you have to find a sexier topic or sexier title. So your audience or your target readers will be able to browse your research. And then you use current nomenclature from the field of study. For example, if you're studying in the field of biology, you should you should be able to use nomenclatures, let's say scientific names in the field of biology. If you're into engineering, you try to search also jargons in engineering. And then the fifth tip is about identifying key variables, both dependent and independent. Kasi usually in experimental researches, we have dependent studies and we have dependent variables and independent variables. So you identify these dependent and independent variables, and you can include that in the research title. It may also reveal how the paper will be organized, your research title. So if you say that this is an experimental, using an experimental research design or determining macroplastic, let's say evaluating microplastics through a complete random experimental design. So meaning to say the paper will be organized, the succeeding sections will use complete random design. Or suggest a relationship between variables and which supports the major hypothesis. For example, cheating and academic performance. Two variables. And then meaning to say, if you see cheating and academic performance in the title, this will give you an idea that the topic or the paper is about cheating as one variable and academic performance as another variable. And eto, usually we make use of 10 to 15 substantive words only. Do not make your research title very long and do not make it also very short. So 10 to 15 words will do. And exclude na yung study of, analysis of, or similar constructions. There's no need to really indicate that in the research title. Titles are usually in the form of a phrase, but it can also be in a form of a question. For example, what are we missing in Philippine eagle conservation? So that could be a viable research title. Of course, you make use of correct grammar and capitalizations. And in academic papers, rarely is a title followed by an exclamation mark. Huwag naman mag-exclamation mark. Pero pwede naman nga ang title or subtitle can be in a form of a question. Now, in my personal experience, in my first draft, This is my topic or title. Philippine brown deer, Rusa Mariana in the Ubu-Manuva ancestral domain, abundance, ethnoecology, and models of conservation attitude. But later, after my consultations with my mentors also, I tried to change it. Philippine brown deer, Rusa Mariana in the Ubu-Manuva ancestral domain, its abundance, distribution, and ethnoecology. But the approved title is, pinadrop yung ethnoecology, and it was stated such as abundance and distribution of the Philippine brown deer Rusa Mariana in the Ubu-Manuvu ancestral domain, Davao City. So you see, the title that you are writing now will not be the last title that you will be writing, or will not be a perfect title. So feel free to explore, write a working title now, and later you can change in any stage of the research process. Now, this is a very crucial part in doing research, especially about literatures, or review of related literatures. Most of my students, they would tell me that there is limited resources or there's limited literatures that study or discuss their research topic. And so when I asked them that you should be able to use at least 50 references, usually they find it challenging, or they find it difficult. Because as they said, there is nothing in the internet, available in the internet that they can use or they can cite in their research. But in this particular lecture, I'll be showing you certain free online journal and research databases that you can actually browse for free and try to check particular articles that may be related to your study. For example, you make use of the core, Science Open, DOAJ, or the Directory of Open Access Journals, Education Resources Information Center, or the SSRN, the Social Science Research Network. You can also make use of the Open DOAR, or the Directory of Open Access Repositories, the Public Library of Science, or the PLOS, Digital Library of the Commons, DLC repository, PubMed related to medical, let's say you would like to study about COVID, etc. And Semantic Scholars. These are some of free sources that you can check. So you can download journal articles or research articles that you can cite in your study. Other free sources, of course, you can make use of the Google Scholar. No? You can just type www.googlescholar.com and try to input your research topic. Then you will find a lot of research articles related to it. You can also make use of ResearchGate in academia.edu. No? This ResearchGate and academia.edu, this is like Facebook but for scientists or for researchers. So you can create your own account in ResearchGate. You can create, and then try to follow the people that you know who are doing research. You just check, let's say, check the name of the researcher, and then you can find there the topics that they have studied so far, or the researches that they have conducted so far. So this is a sample of an article. First is local perception, values, and conservation attitude towards Brahminikites, Halyasar Indus in Tubok District, Davao City, Philippines. This is actually one of the research articles that I have written. If you can see, this is that on top of the illustration, on top of the image, you can find there the name of the journal. It's the Asian Journal of Biodiversity. And you can also find there the ISSN. This is This is like a serial number for scientific articles, both for print and for online SSN. Meaning to say, these are a few things that you need to check so you can establish the legitimacy of the articles that you are reading. Because not everything that you find in the internet, or that not everything that you have Googled is actually reliable. So there is a need for you to be critical. There is a need for you to be able to discern which articles are reliable and which are not. This is another sample of a research article that I have written together with my co-authors from the Philippine Eagle Foundation. This is published in Silvatrop. So Silvatrop here, this is the name of the journal, the Technical Journal of Philippine Ecosystems and Natural Resources. So by the way, if you may be wondering, my interests kasi is related to biodiversity, related to conservation biology, wildlife ecology. So that's why most of the researches that I have written is into this line or into this field. Now, another crucial thing for doing a research or in doing research is selecting a research approach. Now, what do we mean by research approach? These are the general plans. The general plans and procedures for research that span the steps from broad assumptions to detailed methods of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. Meaning to say, this is how you approach your research. General plan composed of procedures for research. And of course, this is related to your topic and to the particular data collection and analysis and interpretation that you are employing. Now, so some of the research approaches that I will be discussing to you this afternoon is about qualitative data and qualitative approach and quantitative approach. But before we can actually discuss qualitative approach and quantitative approach, we must be able to define what is qualitative data and what is quantitative data. Therefore, you should ask yourself if can the data be counted? So if it can be counted, you make use of quantitative data. And this is usually the case when we do experimental research. But this is to emphasize that quantitative research is not everything in research. Now, there is also another methodology or another approach that is emerging, this qualitative data. If the data can't be counted, make use of qualitative research approach. Certain types of data could be words, objects, pictures, observations, and symbols. That's for qualitative research. For quantitative, we make use of numbers and statistics. Now, when we say quantitative research, this is what we usually do in STEM. We make use of experimental designs wherein there's a control setup, there is an experimental setup or a treatment setup, and then later on you try to compare the control and the treatment groups. If there is significant difference through a statistical analysis to determine if, let's say, your fertilizer is effective or not, or if your growth enhancer is effective or not. That's experimental. But other forms of quantitative researches is non-experimental designs, such as surveys. Let's say, for example, you would like to assess the diversity of stick insects or beetles, mga bakukang in your backyard or in a certain forest. Hindi na siya experimental. Rather, you make use of survey assessments, and then later on, you also use statistical tools such as the Shannon Index of Diversity to determine if the diversity is high or low. So that's quantitative research. In qualitative research, we make use of narrative research. Usually, this is through interviews. Key informant interviews, in-depth interviews, or focus group discussions. Narrative research, phenomenological, or you make use of grounded theory, ethnographies, and case studies. Although I will not really be discussing this qualitative research designs one by one, because I suppose your interest is more on quantitative. But this will not limit you to do qualitative. You can also opt to, you can decide to use qualitative designs instead of quantitative. So if that is the case, you need to consult your subject teacher if it's okay. And if it's okay, maybe I can also assist you in doing qualitative research. Another emerging research design is the mixed methods research design. Technically, this mixed methods research design combines quantitative and qualitative. Now, depending on which comes first, quantitative or qualitative, this will define the following: convergent, explanatory sequential, exploratory sequential, transformative embedded, or multi-phase. So for example, in exploratory sequential, we make use of qualitative data first. Meaning to say, let's say you interview 12 participants in a certain barangay. And then the responses of the 12 participants, you develop a research questionnaire, a survey questionnaire that you can use for quantitative research. So from the 12 respondents, you develop a questionnaire, and then the questionnaire will be given to the whole barangay. Let's say the barangay has a population of 1,000 people. So you can now give the quantitative questionnaire to these 1,000 people. On the other hand, when we say explanatory sequential, you make use of a survey, for example, quantitative survey. Let's say survey on preference on online classes. And then you found that there are 30% of the students who would like to do online lectures or video conferences. So that's quantitative. But the explanation of the quantitative result is very limited. So you would like to discover more. You would like to investigate more. You make use of qualitative now. So you interview those 30% who said that why they like video conferences for you to be able to explain the phenomenon comprehensively or holistically. So sa explanatory sequential, nauna yung quanti before ang quali. So it's also called quan-qual method. Sa convergent naman sabay. Sinabay mo yung quanti and quali. Kaya siya convergent mixed methods design. For example, in my thesis project titled Abundance and Distribution of the Philippine Brown Deer, Rusa Mariana in the Ubu-Manuva Ancestral Domain, I had qualitative inquiry first. So I made use of key informant interviews and focus group discussions with 12 forest guards, tribal leaders. So based on the interviews, using the data derived from the interviews, I applied a quantitative survey, a quantitative inquiry using camera trapping, relative abundance index, and distribution mapping. So this is what I did with my research, both quali and quanti. This is just to show you that you can actually make use of both quanti and quali in your research design. But for a high school research, I would suggest that you use quanti first kasi quali requires more critical analysis, much more with mixed methods. So I would highly recommend that we focus on quantitative researches. First, And then maybe later, if you are very good already, we can venture out to qualitative research and even mixed method designs. Now, kasi ito din yung problema usually ng mga students na in terms of citations or in terms of referencing. Usually, we make use of the American Psychological Association or the APA format. But there are also other formats available such as the MLA, the Chicago Turabian, and other formats. I think in IMA, we make use of APA or APA. So how do we reference in a smart way? Gone were the days that we have to manually write the references of our study. This time around, we are very lucky and fortunate because there is already available technology to assist us. This sitefast.com is actually online, so you can try to check this when you have internet connection. You just type www.sitefast.com and you will be able to check this interface. So looking at the interface, meron tayong options dito na web page, book, and journal. Actually, meron pang others. Usually, what we do is we reference journals. We cite journals. So you click journal, and then you click also the type of citation that you would like, the format of citation that you would like to follow. Would you like to follow Chicago, MLA 8, APA 6, APA 7, depending on your institutional requirement. And if you once you're able to click that and then the journal, you can now type your title of the journal that you would like to cite, and automatically it will appear here. And the references or the citations will be shown like at the bottom. Then once you click Save Citation, you can now show here, or you can now check here the references section. So you can just copy and paste this one, copy and then paste it on the Microsoft Word that you are using. So it's actually very easy. You can also do manual inputting. For example, you just click journal and then merong manual dito sa down portion. So you can click manual. Then once manual, you can now manually type the title, manually type the author's name, the journal name, etc. So you can add up. Actually, mag-add up ito dito pag marami ka ng references na gidungag. And then once you are finished, you just have to copy and paste doon sa Microsoft Word that you are using in writing your research. Now let me share with you some common myths about research. Number one is that published information is reliable. Now this is a very critical danger in terms of publishing researches. Kasi most of us think that if it's in Google, for example, then it's already reliable. And we have a tendency to read and to believe this published information. But as researchers, especially in senior high school, especially in STEM, we should be critical about the information that we read and try to discern whether these are reliable or not. Now, actually, this is a very good discussion that maybe we can discuss in another venue. No, because there are a lot of predatory journals that are available. So the key there is you must be able to read the information and cross-reference, meaning to say try to check other information if they are, or if try to read other information as well if they support each other. If not, medyo problematic yun. So do not easily believe in this even if it's published. The next thing is about selecting a faculty research advisor is an unimportant decision. Actually, your research advisor, they have a very critical role in your research journey. So you must be able to work hand in hand with your faculty research advisor. Third is that experienced researchers are above criticisms. No, definitely. Even if these researchers already have published a lot of articles, but there could be, they cannot know it all. And there could be instances wherein their judgments and their analysis could be questioned. So it's not about the person actually. And reasons for doing research do not apply to me. Definitely it applies to you because you cannot graduate without research. And another myth is about you cannot do research. I don't know where to start. No. Even if you don't know where to start, you can still do research. As a matter of fact, all researchers start with not knowing where to start because that's essentially the very reason why you're doing research. So you will know where to start. If you know already where to start, then that means that you're just copying others' outputs. So as researchers, we may be groping in the dark, but the point there is we can still do this. We can still conduct this research. Another thing is academic coursework prepares ones to do research. No, actually when the time comes that you should be doing the research, you will learn that there are many things that you did not learn in the classroom in your previous works. So it's also a dangerous assumption when you say to your students na you are supposed to do this because you have already learned this in Science 1, for example. Because definitely, academic coursework does not prepare you to do research. Research is too time consuming, actually not. You just have to manage your time well. And most of the time kasi we are procrastinating and we are rushing things by the end of the deadline. So that's why we say na wala na tayo tulog because of research. But if you have conducted your research on a very strict time sense or very strict timetable, then you will be able to submit your research on time. And then clinical practice and research activities are different. Actually, they're quite similar, although there are differences. A doctorate is necessary to do research. No, I'm not yet a doctorate degree holder, but I'm doing research. And I think you can also do research because of this justification. And then extensive knowledge of statistics is essential. No, actually not all research require statistical analysis or sophisticated statistical tools. This is also the assumption that are being taught to us, that when we do research, we should be able to use highly sophisticated statistical analysis. But sometimes, just by using simple statistical analysis or simple statistical tools, we can already conduct a very good or produce a very good output. So how do we get the research right? Number one, you should be open to different research traditions. Your institution, IMA for example, you have a different research tradition than DORSU or than the state university. So you should be able to adjust and adapt to these different research traditions. You should also decide on the purpose for undertaking a study, meaning to say you should establish first your big why. Why do you need to conduct this research? And then you should determine the purpose of sampling methods and types. You can do this by reading the literature. You can consider the strength of different research approaches, meaning to say you can compare. If I use this method, what are the limitations? If I use another method, what are the limitations? So given the time and resources that you have, the time, the skills, the knowledge, and the resources, you can now consider what research approach will you use in your study. You could also delimit your research focus if necessary, meaning to say, this is what I mean by saying that you cannot solve everything in just one research. So if you cannot accomplish everything, you need to consider your time duration in the conduct of the research. Let's say you are given 1 year, so you must be able to squeeze your schedules within the 1 year period. And if there are items that you cannot accomplish within 1 year, you have to decide to limit and reject those items. Then, of course, you should consider ethics at the outset of a research study. Ethics is about, let's say you are handling animals, so you should get animal handling clearance or certificate. If you're handling people or interviewing people, you should be able to get the consent of the people that you're interviewing, and of course to get appropriate permits from permit giving bodies. Let's say the LGUs, the DNR, etc. Just a few trivia. Si Luz Oliveros Belardo is a national scientist, and she was able to discover the Tanglad Tagalog as a primary material for synthesizing vitamin A. Si Lourdes Cruz naman, she discovered or studied conotoxins from venomous marine snails. Si Ramon Barba, before mangoes are very seasonal, but because of his mango flower inducing spray, who is a Filipino, we are now able to induce fruiting of mango even during or even outside the seasons or fruiting seasons. And as a matter of fact, I was able to meet Ramon Barba, and yeah, he's very old now. And as a matter of fact, his technology, because it's very affordable, it's now used globally. Not only in the mango industry in the Philippines, but across the globe. And he is a national scientist in the Philippines. And then we have the mag-asawang Carmen and Gregorio Velasquez, who are pioneers in tropical fish parasitology. And as a matter of fact, si Dr. Gregorio Velasquez is known as the father of Philippine phycology. They're also both national scientists. Si Fedel Mundo naman, she designed a prize-winning low-cost incubator made of bamboo. It is cheap and easy to make since bamboo is found in the barrios. So, this simple incubator has saved many lives so far, and which also led to her qualifying in the roster of national scientists. Now, why am I sharing the works of some of our national scientists to you? It is because someday there might be somebody from among this group who will become a national scientist. And the national scientist title, it's actually the highest honor given to a man of science in the Philippines. You are given a cash award and a life pension which is payable monthly. And then you will also get medical and hospitalization benefits, then a place of honor in state functions, national commemorations, ceremonies, and scientific gatherings. Kasi you are regarded as a scientific rock star by then. And then you will be entitled of a state funeral. Ililibing ka sa libingan ng mga bayani as a national scientist. And it's just sad to note that in the Philippines, there's only a few national scientists. So maybe coming from the STEM students that we have in IMA, somebody from you will rise up to the top and become a national scientist later on. And I will be very happy if that will happen. No? Now, to end my presentation, I would like to say that you should be able to publish your research. This is the challenge. Now, although it's not really required in high school research, but I give this as a challenge to you. If you do good with your research and if you are able to follow the appropriate scientific methods in your research, and I will be able to evaluate if your data are reliable, and then you are writing your papers well, then maybe I can assist you in the publication of your research. Now, currently, as I mentioned in the first few slides of my presentation, I am the managing editor of the Davao Research Journal. The Davao Research Journal, this is a scientific journal published by the Davao Oriental State University. So if there are very good outputs in the researches of IMA students, then I may be able to endorse a few of your research outputs for publication in the Davao Research Journal. And then I will be able to assist you in the writing process, and maybe we can list as co-authors your subject teacher, Sir Jim Ryan Solomon, and even your STEM coordinator, Sir Guerrero Lucas. This is a very good, if you will be able to do this, this is a very good precedence because nobody has ever done this. And that will also affirm the quality of your works in IMA if somebody will be able to publish. If you can publish it, that means that we are using sound scientific approaches in the institution, and that is something that other institutions could follow, or that other institutions could be motivated about. Okay, so I think that would be all. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. No, I have provided also my email address to Sir Jim Ryan Solomon. And you can even message me on Facebook if you want, if you have questions, clarifications. As I have mentioned, this is not a one-time journey with you. No, this is not a one-time engagement with you. Rather, it is a journey. Meaning to say, you can call on me, and I will be rest assured that I will be helping you in your research journey. Me myself, I have a lot to learn, especially in doing research. But I think it is a good platform if we all could learn from one another. You're learning from me, and at the same time, I'm also learning from you. And that is a very good academic exercise. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon ahead.